Hello, I am Dr. James Santa. I'm the Director of International Academics of the Common Mission Project, and I'm happy to bring you Concept 7. And this concept is kind of like an add-on to the previous concepts that had to deal with the mission model canvas. And we're going to be talking specifically about product mission fit and dual use. So let's go ahead and dive right into these concept areas. So as you may have recalled from concept 1, product mission fit is really finding where everything aligns between beneficiaries and the value propositions, as you'll see here. So another definition chart, sorry for that, but we're going to go ahead and read through this one. So product mission fit is a measure of the extent to which an organization's value proposition aligns with the needs, preferences, and expectations of its target beneficiaries. It indicates that the organization has developed a product, service, or intervention that is highly relevant, desirable, and impactful to the intended audience, addressing their specific pain points and challenges effectively. In the context of mission-driven organizations and projects, product mission fit is crucial for achieving transformative and sustainable impact on the targeted community. It serves as an indicator of success and signifies that the organization has managed to create a solution that resonates strongly with the beneficiaries, driving high demand and adoption. So really what this is saying is your solution aligns with the problem domain as been defined by all the beneficiary discovery that you've done, and that the solution itself is going to be something that is going to be deployable and adaptable and usable by those targeted beneficiaries. That's all it really is in a nutshell. Again, just another view of where that product mission fit, and it is that intersection between beneficiaries and value propositions. And this is one of those reasons why in previous concept videos, specifically discussing the mission model canvas, that color coding that I recommend is so powerful, because it ensures that you have the beneficiaries that are linked to specific value propositions, and they are both specific and they are grounded in the data collection that you've done via your beneficiary discovery. So how do you do this? Well, the value proposition canvas tends to be a very helpful tool with this. And there's a couple things in here that I'll read out in terms of key points. So you have to identify the pains and gains of the beneficiary that you've spoken with, and you get that via their own words. So remember, the right side of the value proposition canvas, beneficiaries' words. Also keep in mind that if you solve a problem for one individual, you may create problems for others. So again, going back to that example that I've used about, if your problem has to do with data or reporting automation, and one person's sole responsibility is just compiling these reports, but you can get rid of their job with just a simple script, well, that can create a saboteur in that instance, even though for the broader organization, you've done something good for the organization. But what's good for the broader group of individuals, you might find out that it's going to be very difficult and maybe not palatable for one specific individual or group of individuals to take, because it could mean that they're losing funding, they're losing responsibility, or even worst case scenario, they're losing their livelihood. So keep that in mind. This is where MVP coming up in the examples that we provided in the previous concept, this black box idea, are very powerful to use. So you don't have to create anything tangible. It can be as simple as a drawing on a virtual piece of paper. And what you want to do is use that MVP to your advantage in order to validate or invalidate hypotheses you have, learn from it, and then test again. So we've talked about dual use in a previous concept, but I do want to dive into this a little bit. And again, one of the things that's really good about dual use is that when the product is usable or the solution is usable beyond just your sponsoring organization. So let's use an example here for kind of like the real world. Think about what's happening right now with a company like SpaceX, where historically NASA has had the federal funding and the obligation to be the tip of the spear with all space exploration and all the technology that's associated with getting astronauts into space, the space station, and our both planetary and exoplanet exploration that we do as a nation, in the United States at least. Well, what you're seeing with a company like SpaceX right now is that they are actually getting funding from their own investors and from other private entities that are facilitating a huge amount of really innovative tools that are being used for space travel and space exploration. One of the things that comes to mind, and if you haven't seen this, I absolutely recommend it, is seeing where these booster rockets, which usually used to be shed and were never reusable again after the spacecraft had taken off, now are landing. and they're actually able to reuse these very, very expensive components and being able to use them again. Well, that funding has its own use for private enterprise, and you're seeing that with like Starlink satellite systems. If we keep with the SpaceX example, but you're also seeing where NASA and us as taxpayers are not necessarily having to fund every innovation that's coming out of the federal government. There are applications that are applicable beyond just the scope of, in this case, a federal partner. And that's something that's really interesting. Another one you can think about that's become very ubiquitous is GPS. Now, GPS was developed for use by the federal government in the United States, by the military. I remember when I was in the Army, we had this big device called a plugger that looked like an ancient cell phone from the 1980s, and it would hopefully help keep you on track. But now GPS is everywhere. It's on your cell phone. You go to a new city or a new town and you get lost. It's simple to bring up a Google or Apple map to get you where you need to get to. These are technologies that have become basically common use for a lot of us. And a lot of those products and those services and those technologies, those policies have started off with a focus on government application, but they realize that hey, there's applicability here for private entities as well, and businesses can grow out of this. So that's what dual use is in a very compressed form. But the thing to keep in mind about dual use and why it's impactful for federal customers as federal sponsors is that it offsets the cost to a great extent, and it increases the viability because there's revenue coming in that offsets that mission budget cost block that we see on the mission model canvas. So let's get the definition of dual use then. In the context of government-controlled technology, dual use refers to goods, software, and technology that can be used for both civilian and military purposes. These items are subject to special export controls in order to prevent their proliferation to countries that could use them for military purposes or to develop weapons of mass destruction. Think drone technology, for example. Oh, it's right there. So drones are a good example. They can be used for aerial mapping and processing commercial geospatial data for agriculture, while at the same time, armies can use them for battlefield reconnaissance of enemy positions. And sometimes, if these get into the hands of users that we don't want them to, those enemy positions can be used against our allied forces. Now, something to keep in mind that I hear oftentimes in the H4 courses is that, well, 100 interviews, I feel like we've done enough here. We don't have to get to 100. Well, if you go and take this and think you're going to productize your solution or come into your own business, 100 interviews is nothing. You're talking thousands of discovery sessions. And keep in mind that interviews are really only part of your validation of your space. This is where your MVP becomes very helpful, but your interviews really are just the base. It just provides the basic framework in order to validate, in part, your problem domain. So what you're going to do in the H4 course is just a little bit, as you can see from the graphic on your screen. But once this goes out and you're handing this product over or the solution over to your sponsoring organization, there's still a lot more work that needs to get done. And at some point, there might be the realization that, oh, there is a dual use for civilian and defense or government application. So if you start thinking about this relatively early on and think about it from beneficiary discovery, who else has this problem? It's generally not going to be just somebody in this, maybe the Department of State or the Department of Defense. There are going to be users that have these issues all over the place. So let's think about an example about, I had worked with the Department of State about tokens that you can press that would indicate your location if there was a threat detected. Well, who else has threat detection they have to manage? Probably your university, your local hospital. There's lots of different types of organizations that would benefit from this technology being more ubiquitously available. So think about that when you're going through and doing your discovery, is who else has this problem? Because I guarantee you, it's not just your sponsoring organization. Now, again, if you do decide to move into this idea of creating your own business, this is the business model canvas, which was the basis of the mission model canvas. And there's just a couple of key differences here that I'll call out. So instead of buy-in and support on the right-hand side there under desirability of customer relationships, instead of beneficiaries, you have customer segments. And instead of deployment, you have channels. Lastly, the last two differences are in viability on the bottom there. So you have cost structure instead of mission budget cost. And then instead of your mission achievement and impact factors, you have revenue streams. So again, the government, if you're working with a government organization, their sole purpose is not to generate revenue. It is important, but these services cost money. They are not revenue generators. But if you're starting a business, businesses exist to generate revenue, and that's why the distinctions here are made the way that they're made. And that is the end of concept 7. Thank you.